Good day, everyone. Today we'll be discuss about culture and the arts for the subject art appreciation. So we'll tackle about soul making, appropriation, and improvisation. So soul making comes from the Greek word poio. So it means to be the author or maker of something. So in philosophy, when we say poiesis is the activity in which a person brings something into being that did not exist before. So on the succeeding topics that we'll be discussing, we'll discuss how do we create, how do we put soul into something. So that is about soul making. So the reason for the term poesis, for example, is actually more on the soul builder or soul grower. So it is the emphasis on creative, intelligent authorship. So the making is not done by impersonal process but by intelligent forces. So that is soul making. So, in order for people to make sense of the work, it would require you a great and depth understanding on the different visual elements where the art was grounded. So, meron siyang philosophical background. So, it's based on the different movement on how should we interpret certain art pieces, music, and dances. So it is actually important for audiences or for the perceivers to note that artwork must have a certain level of awareness of the style, form, and content of the said work. So, in other words, we need to have a great understanding on the background. So, what philosophical framework this art comes from. So we have different categories of soul making. So when we say categories, these are the division on how we put something into place. So the first category is actually crafting images. So when we craft images, we use of image to represent in any form. So what are the forms that we can use? We can use painting, sculpture, drawing, storytelling, and poetry, dancing, composing, or taking notes. Crafting images using painting. Technically speaking, you're crafting pictures. You're crafting emotions. And when also with sculpture and drawing. But for storytelling and poetry, we make use of metaphors. We make use of figurative language to perceive or to present a certain image or ito yung tinatawag natin sa English language na imagery. You construct image on the mind of your readers through your storytelling and poetry and your writing. So, crafting images was actually rooted from personal experiences or personal encounters or events that triggered our reflection, recalling, and judgment. Kaya if you're going to ask certain authors, how did they come up with with their novels? So, yeah, I was inspired by this. I was inspired by that. Yun ang lagi nilang sinasabi because crafting images must be based on your personal encounters. So either it's a real encounter or a fantasize or you apply imaginative creation on your novel or your writings. It is really based on personal encounters and judgment. So when we say crafting stories, the moment we write, engrave, or inscribe our own thoughts and ideas and commentaries, criticism, and either positive or negative emotions, we are actually crafting stories. So it becomes our own history that can be handed down to our children and family for the succeeding generation. That is why one of the in understanding the history of mankind, it is important that one of the material culture that historians use to describe to analyze the past histories of mankind is through their writings. Yeah, through their writings, we can analyze, we can know how they live their life, how they perceive their environment, the other people around them. So that is crafting stories. So it's a one way of analysis in historical research. Okay, another type is the crafting instrument. So when we say craft instrument, we are talking about the instrument maker. The instrument maker are also called musicians. They may not be the one playing the instrument, but they are the one creating the instrument. Because making or crafting instrument is actually transcending our feelings, emotions, and sensation into a another realm. So the soul is accompanied by a vessel so that the soul will not vanish. So you transform any found or used object into a musical instrument, it actually allows you to discover the balance and harmony to produce sound that is entertaining, enhancing, and magical. So those crafters are actually considered a musician. They may not present music through playing it, but with making this instrument. And this instrument is the vessel, the means of a musician to portray the music that he wants or she wants to present to the world. Another type of craft is the crafting movement. So from the word movement, it's actually more on beatings. So life is a flowing images accompanied by flowing narratives. So everything that we do in life is actually a performance. We actually perform life. So when we say crafting movements, we create our movement. Yung kinesthetic na tinatawag natin, yung different movement natin, yung different hand gestures, how you dance, gaano kalawak yung space na ginagamit, and how you craft movements actually signifies different emotions or different symbols. Another is crafting techniques. So actually, techniques is a different evocative description of experiences like photograph, studies, puppet and mask construction, notepad studies. When we talk about techniques, how you present. For example, in swimming, pwede kang gumamit ng butterfly stroke, backstroke, on how you swim. That is actually crafting techniques. You create a new form or a new way of presenting emotions, presenting art pieces. Actually, in the past, ang mayroon lang talaga, what we have is actually painting, landscape. But in the recent years, we have now the photography. That is actually another technique of portraying emotions or portraying art pieces. So it comes with the new technologies that we have. That is technique. So we'll tackle about the different major points. So an alternative for knowing ourselves and looking into the depth and real meaning of what we are doing for everyday life. So in understanding art, we try to connect it with our everyday routines. So with these different routines, we can create stories, we can transform brief moment into images and symbols. So art is also a way of connecting with people, understanding their culture, and embodying tolerance and peace. So we must always develop the artist within ourselves. We must awaken the art in us that has been stagnant or underdeveloped for numerous years. It opens door for multiple intelligences of expression. Yun yung mga major points natin na tinatawag when we craft. An exploration and application of the imagination in an active way. So in making art, an artist or artisan or even an ordinary person utilize imagination to survive and live. So, imagination, nandun na yung from the word imagine, is an important tool in developing an artwork. So, meron din tayong substance and meanings ng artwork where after the audience perceive the art, we can form the meanings and symbols of the art. So, although there is always a dominant meaning or theme of a certain piece, individual differences and diverse experiences is also a factor on how we see, how we present things through our senses. So magkakaiba yung individual differences natin. So it takes a special skill to hold an image in thought and turn that imagination into art. So it's actually a special skill. Hindi lahat nakakagawa or hindi lahat they can reinterpret reinterpret ang tinatawag nating nakakagawa ng art. Okay, so I'll give you examples of art appropriation. So appropriation of art is actually reinterpreting existing art pieces into another perspective. So these are actually sample of appropriation art or the art appropriation. You reinterpret. You try to reinterpret in the content. In the current times. Actually, this painting is known as the pearl with the pearl earring. Actually, based din siya sa story about I forgot about the name of the story, but it's a 17th or 18th century novel about a maid with a pearl earring. Yeah. Next, a good example naman nito. Oh, that this is another example of art appropriation. You try to recreate the art in another form. Ayan siya. So appropriation is an art is the use of the pre-existing objects or images with little or no transformation applied to them. So ibig sabihin with little or no transformation, when we say little, you try to reinterpret it another way. Without either, siguro ginawan mo siyang katatawanan. Siguro, iniba mo yung angle or posture. Kaya mayroon siyang, or there is transformation. So the intention of appropriation artists are often questioned since issues of plagiarism or forgery sometimes arises. Pero ang art appropriation naman it's not actually fraudulent or it's not plagiarism as long as the audiences are informed that this is actually a appropriated art. Kasi when you sell something or when you present a painting which is an art appropriated painting, you did not signify or you did not describe that this was an appropriate party. That is fraudulent. That is plagiarism. So there is actually a certain level of freedom and creativity experience in art can also lead to appropriation. So kapag meron tayong art appropriation, almost there will always be debate whether or not something is just an appropriation of an existing work or just a plain forgery. So we have different types of cultural appropriation. We have object appropriation. So when we say object appropriation, it refers to the concrete and noticeable work of art. So it happens when a tangible work previously owned by people from one culture was taken and adopted by a person or a group of person from another culture. For example of this one, this is actually an example of object appropriation. Another is the content appropriation. So when we say content appropriation, the work of art are short stories, poetry, and musical composition. Actually, there are a lot of stories, folklores, from different countries which are actually very similar. So that is actually a good example of content appropriation. For example, si Malakas at si Maganda, and then the other people or other ethnic group have another version. So that is actually content appropriation. Ang content appropriation happens when the art piece is actually intangible. When we say intangible, hindi siya nahawakan. So examples ng mga ito ay essay, short stories, folklores, and the like. Okay, we also have style appropriation. So, ang style appropriation under content appropriation is the artists do not replicate the work created by a person or group. However, they use the element of those work in creating their own. A good example for style appropriation is when the same films are, for example, magkaiba sila ng story. Pero yung plot, yung development, and the theme is almost the same. For example, yung Penthouse, o ngayon may ginaya ng Philippines niya. So that is actually content appropriation if the whole content was actually copied or based from the previous content. Di ba meron tayo, meron pang isa I know it's not the Penthouse, it should be A World of the Married Couple. That is actually style appropriation. Another is motive appropriation. Ang motive appropriation is when an artist are inspired by the art from a different culture but they do not produce artwork using exactly the same style. So magkaiba sila ng style. It's not really based but an inspiration. So that is motive. So when we say subject appropriation naman, it occurs when a subject matter from another culture is appropriated. Example, yung mga British writers, they create a story about Pacific Islanders, so outsiders' point of view siya. So this may happen in an offensive way and sometimes it's morally unacceptable. Yung subject appropriation, you talk about Pacific Islanders where in fact you are not one of those Pacific Islanders. So that is subject appropriation. So these are improvisation. Ito yung improvisation tinatawag natin. It is the art of acting and reacting in the moment to one's surrounding. So this can result in the invention of new thought, patterns, or new ways to act. So yung invention cycles, nangyayari siya when it is accompanied with a true or intuitive understanding of the skill, which is one is improvising. From the word improvise, you make, you create. So improvisation have led artists to find other medium and avenues to showcase their creative expression. A good example for this improvisation is the painting about the girl with the pearl earring was actually based on a novel. So the novel was reinterpreted into a painting. So that is improvisation. So the improvisation focuses on bringing one's personal awareness into that moment and on developing a profound understanding for the action one is performing. So yung fusion ng awareness and understanding, it brings the practitioner or the artist where he can or she can act with a range of options that best fit the situation. Actually, lagi itong nangyayari from a short story ginawa ng painting, ginawa, for example, we have a, I forgot about that name of poem. The names replied to the shepherd, and meron pang isa, the shepherd, ano yung I forgot, yeah, actually reply siya ni I forgot about the name of the author or the writer. It's a reply to another poem of a person, so that is actually improvisation. So these are the skills and techniques in improvisation. So improvisation skills can apply to many diverse abilities or forms of communication and expression across all disciplines. So ibig sabihin, it's not only limited to your short stories, essays, painting, architecture. So they can be applied in many other forms. So improvisation techniques are utilized widely in training for performing arts or activities, particularly in music, theater, and dance. Ang mga example niya is extemporize or ad-lib, playing it by ear, take it as it comes, and make it up as we go along. So meron tayong tinatawag na stopgap. So yung stopgap is the improvisation intent to solve a problem on a temporary basis and on the proper solution is unavailable. So it applies in the field of engineering is stopgap na tinatawag natin. Ang brainstorming naman is a group of problem-solving techniques in which any all the ideas that the group member may have are permitted and encouraged to be expressed regardless of the actual practicality or important and thinking outside the box. So improvisation can be done in various art form. Merong pwede siyang on the spot, at the moment, or off the cuff or impromptu. So it can take place more often if it is practiced as a means of encouraging artistic or creative behavior. So it can be done with individual group or individual or group is acting, dancing, singing, improvisation, impromptu, on the spot. Sa music improvisation, it can be an immediate musical composition which combines performance with communication of emotions while simultaneously playing instrumental, as well as a spontaneous response to other musicians. Another example is composing music on the fly, yung impromptu na you compose kasi biglang nawala yung music. So instead of having accompaniment, nagkaroon ng a cappella. That is actually a music improvisation. Sa theater naman, ang improvisation dito, if for example, they forget about their lines, so they must still present their dialogue. So instead of presenting the script, they present the another conversation or dialogue with the other actors. So it's created spontaneously by the performer. Sa dance, ganun din naman sa dance. It's actually creating movement. Marami siya. Dance, pwede namang contact improvisation. Ang contact is talk about weight, touch, and movement awareness. Okay, so the major points of improvisation, the art and act of improvising or of the composing, uttering, executing, or arranging anything without previous preparation or producing something from whatever is existing or available. Yan yung mga major points natin. Okay, so that would be all for today. God bless and thank you.